Hi, Tomorrow News. Happy Tuesday. It is a new day. We have a new set of headlines and something special for you today. A special guest, and I'm excited for you to hear a little bit of his story and perspective on the moment in history that we share. First things first, though, I'm going to work through a couple of the big headlines over the last 24 hours. I have my notes because there were a lot of big announcements yesterday, including from the President of the United States, the State Department, Department of Defense as well, all had separate briefings. So I went through all of them, listened to them separately, and I just want to give you a couple bullet points. For those of you who are new to Smarter News, this is what we do on a regular basis, which is usually these shorter reports, a few different stories, and just the key things you should know and why they matter. Obviously, what we're watching right now in Afghanistan is one of the biggest stories of the moment and potentially of our lives as we look over the course of our lives and what we've been witnessing, the longest war in America history. So I do want to take a moment just to look through a couple of these headlines and then, of course, spend the bulk of our time with Travis. And I think you'll see why once you meet him. Some of you already know him. But let's just start. President Biden spoke yesterday. He had a national address about what was happening in Afghanistan. He spoke for roughly about 20 minutes. I put a portion of that address on our Instagram feed and on our website as well. I think what's most important when the president speaks is that you have direct access for you to listen to exactly what he's saying so that you can make up your own mind. There'll be plenty of opinions, but it's all there for you. And some of the highlights we cut down to about a 3-minute piece. One of the things I do want to mention as I was reflecting on what he said, and this is an observation, it's not a criticism or a critique, but it's important because these speeches are strategically put together by an entire team. So what's not in them is just as important as what's in them. And the president had some very direct words for the Afghan army, for those in the Afghan government, specifically the president who fled. The President Biden, didn't speak very much specifically about the Taliban at all. In fact, he only made a few references to the Taliban, and that's going to become important in just a moment. The Department of Defense did come out and said that they have control over the international airport, Hamid Karzai International Airport. That's often referred to as HKIA. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about that. Since I've never been to Afghanistan, and I'm certain that several of you haven't, our guest has, that maybe we don't know some of the acronyms or even the abbreviations. HKIA is the international airport in Kabul. And so the U.S. Department of Defense says they have control. They have control of air traffic control as of the last 24 hours. And so flights are going to be landing. They also have access to try to arrange other non-military flights. And that's important because quantity matters when you're looking to move a big group of people out of the country. Important to note, there was a service member yesterday that had an injury, a superficial injury. There were reports about gunfire at the airport, and there's been a variety of different reports that haven't been able to be confirmed. The Department of Defense wasn't able to do that as well. And this wound for the service member was superficial, and they were right back on duty. I think it's important that you know that that happened. The other thing the Department of Defense talked about yesterday is no airstrikes. That they were not organizing, coordinating airstrikes in Afghanistan against the Taliban. This is something we've done over the last several weeks. One of the things that they talked about is that they had trained the Afghan army. They have air power, and they are in charge of their missions. They've been in charge of these operations over the last year. So the Department of Defense said they weren't doing that anymore. This is part of the handover. I want to bring it back to the president's speech. The president said the Taliban don't have an air force. Look at what we've given the country, he was saying essentially. You know, the Taliban don't have an air force. We have supplied this equipment and this training to the Afghan army, and the Taliban doesn't have it. So we were what he was expressing is we were giving the Afghan army an upper hand. You know, it's also important to note that the Department of Defense said that they weren't actively destroying any equipment that was left behind. So it is true that the Taliban did not have an air force. The question moving forward is, do they now that they have this equipment that's available to them? The State Department said that no one is at the embassy in Kabul, that that's completely shuttered at this point. Everybody's been moved to the airport. There are about 70,000 special immigration visas that have been given to our partners, people that have helped us in Afghanistan over the last decade or so. They're looking at this moment at about 2,000 people that they've been able to try to arrange to get out of the country. These numbers are fluctuating all the time. I think what's most important to know is that they're trying to get thousands out of the country. They have the capacity right now to get about 22,000 Afghans out of the country under this special immigration visa. Where are they going in the country? Where are they going in America? Fort Lee, Virginia has a setup for that. Fort Bliss, Texas, and Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. These are places where some of these folks may end up eventually. Again, the capacities for 22,000, maybe more, maybe less. Really important note. The State Department was asked directly, you have said, U.S. government, that you are not going to recognize any government in Afghanistan that takes the government by force. But the Taliban didn't take Kabul by force. They came in. There was almost a surrender, right, by the Afghan government. The Afghan president fled. So since they didn't take it by force, U.S. government, this was a question from the press pool, then are you going to recognize the Taliban? Are you prepared to recognize the Taliban as the rightful leader in Afghanistan? And there was no specific answer. Right now in Doha, there's negotiations taking place between the Taliban, the U.S. government, and other international partners. What is this going to look like in Afghanistan? Who's going to recognize the Taliban as the rightful leader in Afghanistan if that's eventually the case? What's also important is that although the Afghan president fled, apparently there are members of the Afghan government that are still taking part in these negotiations. What does that mean? I'm not sure. What emerges from that, I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone knows at this time, but watch for any headlines that talk about any sort of diplomatic recognition with the Taliban in power. The Taliban have been busy, by the way. They're coming out and saying that they're going to offer amnesty, that they want to elevate women. This is what they're saying. The question is, what about their actions? Obviously, in the news, you're going to hear a lot of different debate. It's always a little interesting to hear people's different opinions. What I think is really important is to hear from people that have spent years in Afghanistan and who have actually confronted the Taliban and can provide a little perspective. And oftentimes the voices of our service members, even after 2 decades, are not included in some of these high-profile debates, And so I really want to make sure that at Smarter News we do something different. And so that's why we have someone special to join us today. Let's see if we can get Mills in. And I want you to have access to Travis as well so you can ask him some questions. He has a very unique story. There he is.
I look extra bald today in this lighting. I tell you, I got to figure this out. But all my books, look how smart I look with all the books.
You look smart, and you know what? As I know in television news, lighting is everything. So if you can talk to us about the military, I can help you with your lighting.
I love it. Well, I was in the military, then they kicked me out.
No, they did, Travis. That's not true.
Yeah, I wasn't fit for. No, they didn't. You're right. Anyway.
Okay, so
you have been nailing it, by the way. I've been watching the whole time, per usual, because you're a champion, and everybody knows that. And I'm not sure if you told everybody we get to hang out soon, but I'm not going to tell them where because I don't want you to have all your fans show up and to make it weird for you and me and the families to hang out. But I am fired up.
So let's give everyone a little bit of background. This is Travis. Clearly, he has a very, quiet personality, not a good sense of humor. We're going to try to work through that. But Travis and I met back in 2012. We were living very, very different lives at the time. I was a national news anchor in New York City, and Travis was serving our country in Afghanistan. Travis, tell us a little bit about your deployments to Afghanistan.
Yeah, so the first one, I was over there for 15 months. I had a girl send me a MySpace friend request. I ended up marrying her. And the second one I went over, I lived in mud huts, took Taliban compounds for a year, had a great time, came back, and my wife bought a house with the power of attorney that I signed. So that's exciting. And then my third one, I went over and I happened to set my backpack down on a bomb. And when the bomb went off, it took off my right arm, right leg, and then eventually my left leg and my left arm as well. So now I'm a quadruple amputee. So, hey, winners, what's going on? That's how I wave now.
Okay. So you are one of the few surviving quadruple amputees. And just picking one of five. I think that's important. You're unique for many reasons, that being one of them, just statistically. But we met about 6 weeks after your injury. Someone had sent me a message. This is how social media works sometimes. Someone had sent me a message and said, hey, someone from our hometown really was injured in Afghanistan. He has a baby. How old was Chloe at the time?
6 months old.
6 months old. You had this beautiful wife. You come back to Walter Reed and, there's obviously a big question about the future. And so we spoke on May 30th, 2012 for the very first time live on television. And I didn't know what to expect. I got exactly what I'm getting right now, which
Yeah.
is
Well, I'll be honest. In 2012, I didn't know what to expect either because I didn't
yeah.
see a bomb coming. but, but anyways, no, I know we're supposed to be serious because you always do really good, compelling stories, and they're always very, to the truth and the point of it. So I'm sorry if I'm not trying to
No,
joke
this is
around.
listen. This is it's actually mind blowing. Is that I'm like, is that appropriate? When if someone's new and they've never met you before, Travis, if they see you walking down
Yeah.
the street, it is like it's shocking. You're like, wait, what? He has no
Yeah.
arms, he's no legs, and he's walking down the street. He's driving his big truck, and so you have talked to us repeatedly over the years about what it was like in combat in Afghanistan. We've talked a lot about your recovery. But I really wanted to get your thoughts today about what you're even feeling when you're seeing these headlines in Afghanistan. And you can just like go for it. Like, what has come
Yeah.
through your mind over the last several days?
Well, I mean, the last several days, I guess I've been thinking like I put too much weight on for COVID, so I need to lose some weight. But besides for that, based off of what I'm seeing on the TV, no, I'm just saying I put the COVID-19 on for sure. But unfortunately for me, like my heart goes out to the Afghan nationals that are still there. That I know, we're trying to help us. We're fighting for believing. They were believing in a democracy and a united nation when we were over there fighting an ideology, and that's a hard war to win. And I was in the Oval Office with President Trump, a few years back, and I told him, "You're never going to win the war, but you can open the rules of engagement because they're not fighting for a nation. The Taliban are fighting for their belief system and their ideology." So, in my head, I knew this day was always going to happen. Now, I think the planning was terrible, just terrible. And we have a lot of people on the ground that need to get out. And I hope they get that chance and they get the ability to. But also, where I fall on this is I hope the service members like myself, like your husband, like all the people out there that did serve, they understand like, hey, look, this wasn't all for nothing. And that's kind of the problem. A lot of guys that I've served with are like, what was it even for? Like, why would we even go? And I just rely on, look, we gave some education, right? You can't unteach reading and writing to children, to little girls. You can't give all that stuff. And you can't also take back the wells that we dug and the schools that we built and the ability to give them hope in life. So I just want the people that are veterans out there to understand, like, look, we did a good thing. Yes, I got messed up over there, but it's okay. It's okay because I know that I went, and every time I went was for the person to my left and my right, to bring back as many American service members as I could, and to root out the evil that is the Taliban or Al Qaeda or whoever over there. And I'm not upset about my injuries, right? Having no arms, no legs. I mean, I'm fortunate to be very successful with running a nonprofit and things like that, and motivational speaking. But I just don't want it to be lost on the service members that we did something special over there. We fought for the right and the good, as well as we were able to, make sure as many service members as possible came back home to their families and their loved ones.
What was it like to fight the Taliban?
Oh, a bunch of jerks. They'd run around, they put bombs in the ground, and they run away scared, and they shoot at you and try to get you to dive on the bombs. I'll be honest with you. They knew that they could not fight us, a conventional army. Just like the Revolutionary War, the American patriots knew that they could not fight the British. And that's why movies like The Patriot are formed, because, Sean Marion, the Swamp Fox, that's how they fought, hit and run tactics. They blended in with the population, and they ended up harassing it so bad that we won our independence because people in America were fighting for freedom, whereas the Taliban and everybody over there, they unfortunately knew there was going to be a day where we were going to leave. I think there was an interview 15 years ago done by the Taliban commander where he was telling the news reporter, like, we'll just wait. The Americans are going to have to leave eventually because we were not going to do what we did in Germany, build a base or a couple bases in a civilized place that, you could broker a peace deal and go back to normal.
Should we have done that? Should we have even considered that, Travis? Like, even if it was small, a couple thousand people, what do you think?
Yeah, we should have kept Bagram and we should have kept Kandahar for their strategic power in the region. And we could have took the ANA and ANP and pushed them out to make a big enough, big enough perimeter around those bases to keep the Taliban at bay. The rest of the country, we probably would be able to do nothing with it. But for the strategic power of where Bagram was located and Kandahar and, the air base and all of that, we should have kept them. I personally believe that. But also, we don't need troops on the ground anymore with today's modern war. And they don't even fight like you're not lining up in the field and fighting each other. They're shooting and they're running from 800 meters away. And by the time you sweep the ground and keep it all safe to get to them, they're gone. And the rules of engagement, they got so bad where we would have Kiowas that come on station, and they would see the 2 guys that just shot at us and the AK-47s by their feet. But if they're not holding that gun shooting, they're not a combatant, so they couldn't shoot them. They'd
What's
pick
a
it up.
Kiowa?
It's the fast bird. You know that, don't you? It's like a helicopter. It's like the fast. They call them the little birds, the fast birds. They come in, they go, wah, and they take out the enemy when they're allowed to.
Okay, but that's an important point. So what Travis is talking about, rules of engagement, is, and Travis, you really have I mean, your story the last time we talked that you shared, and actually I'd never heard that before, about how the rules of engagement is something that you even think about regarding your injury, that the rules of engagement really handcuffed American forces in a lot of ways in the way that they were able to fight the Taliban. And it's mind-blowing. Can you just walk us through that? Oh, is someone calling? Is someone? You know what? This happens to us every time. Someone tries to call you and interrupt this conversation.
Jerks. But so for me, we had like a raid camera, they call it, like 30 feet in the air, would see up to 6 kilometers, and we would watch people put bombs in the ground at night, but we couldn't shoot them. We couldn't go out and get them because we weren't allowed to go out at nighttime because the president of Afghanistan told our administration at the time that it scared his people, and our slogan was literally, "We own the night." So we couldn't go out and get them and do anything like that, and we just had to go walk around basically minefields and try not to get hit by any bombs. I had 22 guys in my unit get injured, and not one of them was shot. It was all because of IEDs.
So when you, before you were injured, you saw people putting IED. If I remember correctly, you saw people planting IEDs. Like you could see it happening, and you weren't able to shoot that person that is putting an IED in the ground, right?
We're allowed. We couldn't drop mortars on them. We couldn't go out and get them at nighttime because they always did at nighttime. They knew that we weren't going to come out, and they knew our rules of engagement. And then we had 4 guys captured on a raid that we did, and we took them 10 kilometers back, like with 7 or 8 huge firefights, like huge just troops in contact. And then we got back, and the Afghan national government said we didn't take pictures with the RPGs and the AK-47s and the 600 pounds of homemade explosives, so we're letting them go. And then when I got blown up, the same guy we had captured, because we did like the fingerprint and the iris scan, was the same fingerprints all over the bombs that were in the ground that I hit. You know, so
the guy that you captured was the same guy that likely planted the bombs.
No, he was. Yeah,
he was.
We had his fingerprints. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see me as my journalism. I'm like, it's likely we'll get a triple source of that. But okay, you have the fingerprints. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So that was the same guy. So if you were able to keep that guy, potentially those bombs would not have been planted, and the same thing would not have been happening. Yeah,
well,
that must have been hard.
Yeah.
That must have been pretty hard to take when you learned that.
No, because the only reason I knew his fingerprints were on him was because my sister unit found him again. And then he gone. But not because, yeah, but anyways.
Okay, so justice was served in that particular case. How long, if the rules of engagement, I know it's hard to deal with hypothetics, but I also want to get an idea of if the rules of engagement weren't where they were, if they didn't handcuff you as much. And this is true across multiple forces, by the way. This is not a story that only Travis tells. This is, a lot of people had this experience in Afghanistan and in Iraq. If you didn't have that, Travis, how long do you think it would take to defeat the Taliban if you were just able to go out and just do what you were trained to do?
Unfortunately, we're not in the world of World War II. We're not in the mindset of like the atomic bombs and stuff like that. And, casualties are casualties. So separating the Taliban from the population probably was not going to happen. Changing their mindset was not going to happen. And the unfortunate part is, every year or 15 months or 9 months or whatever it was, we change out. So I'm dealing with a village elder who's dealing with me for a year, and then I'm like, hey, check this out. Here's my counterpart. You got to learn this guy now. Staff Sergeant Johnson, Staff Sergeant Mills is leaving. And just, unfortunately, it just wasn't going to, it's like, it's a survival mode over there, right? It's just, they do what they can with us, but they also do what they can with the Taliban because they want to live too. And I think with how corrupt it is, it was never going to be, it's not a war you can win. I'll be honest. It's not a war you can win. You can take Osama bin Laden out, and you can shoot as many of them as you want, but they all go back over the border in Pakistan every winter. They come back in the spring We don't, and it's just that hatred breeds hatred, and that's just how it is.
So one of the things the president said yesterday was that we accomplished our mission, that Afghanistan is no longer, that Al Qaeda is not thriving in Afghanistan, essentially. And that's one of the big things that's come up, which is, we want to make sure that Afghanistan is not a safe haven for terrorists.
Yeah.
What do you think the likelihood is that it's not? How would you assess that?
Oh, well, yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that can definitely or definitively say like, oh yeah, Al Qaeda's not here, Taliban's here, but they're the good guys now. They're the ones that we like compared to the Al Qaeda, who was terrible. Yeah, no, it's all hot air.
Sort of like this overarching umbrella of Islamic jihad that has a mission to create a country, in some cases like the Taliban, that are set up according to Islamic law. And sometimes the academic line that is drawn is about who wants to actually attack America on American soil. And so, I mean, time will tell on that. You think about your kids, Travis, you have a daughter and a son, and you think about future conflicts. When you see what's been happening over the last several days, what do you think, how does that affect our national security?
I always tell people I love the military. It's the best days of my life. And I think like, man, I'll never be that cool again, unfortunately. Like that was like the highlight of like how cool I was over there. Best and worst times of my life, but something I always remember. But then I sit there and I go, man, was Vietnam really that much different when they pulled out of Vietnam than what they did right here? Fought so hard, especially like in Iraq with your loved one there, that he fought hard, and they just give it back. And it's like, do I want my kids to go over there and do that kind of thing? Like I don't even. Like, I want to serve my country, and I do the best I can, but, boy, it's irritating. I wish we just had people in there that understood what war was when they send our kids and our people over there, because to fight so hard and then give it back. I mean, that's the same thing they did in the Arghandab Valley with the documentary Restrepo, where people were like, why do we even do it then? And I feel like that's a big thing that people are wrestling with right now, is why do we stay for 20 years? And I try not to shoot sides on politics publicly because I have a nonprofit, but I think that President Biden was right when he did say, like, if the country's not standing up by itself right now or whatever, they probably never were going to really stand up for themselves. But, I don't know. I got on a tangent there. I'm sorry. I got lost in what we're talking about.
No, what you were saying was, I think you actually gave us one of the big headlines from yesterday. It was that the president did say that said, we can't invest our own time and money in people if it's not what the priority is for the people on the ground. Well, how do we prevent, is there a group think, Travis, about how we're approaching Islamic ideology? Is there something, I know this is kind of a big question, but you were actually there. You actually put your life on the line. You fought for the country, right? And some would say that it forever, obviously, clearly, forever changed your life. And the question is, well, how do we learn from this? Like, if this is not what we want, if we do not want images of Americans evacuating an embassy anywhere in the world, like, what do we need to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, you can uncage the the beasts instead of handcuff them, because I'll tell you right now, we fight harder, we are more ferocious than we're allowed to be. So if we were able to go over there and do the things that we had to do to get the job done and continue that, we wouldn't have a problem. But inch by inch, little by little, they handcuffed more and more deployments and said, you can't do this now, you can't do this now, you can't do this now. And it's kind of sad, because not that I want to chop people's heads off, but the Taliban can chop my head off, and then if we capture somebody, it's all about Geneva Convention. And I'm like, seems legit, seems about right.
Right.
They don't like the same rules.
So Petunia has a great question. She just wanted to know, like, who establishes the rules of engagement, and as a soldier, how do you get those orders? How does that come down to you?
Just the command, I guess. I don't know. Somebody probably sitting at a desk in Washington decides it's going to be a good idea. So, hey, I think this sounds good. Let's do this now. I couldn't tell you. Everybody's all about
Go ahead.
CYA. Like, basically, like my commander in my third deployment, he was so worried about covering his own butt and not making like any waves. I don't know. He didn't adjust or adapt to what we had to really do for the mission.
Well, and it's important to point out that if you don't follow the rules, Travis, you can get in trouble, right? Like if
Oh yeah,
you don't, that you can get in big trouble. You could go to court, you could be imprisoned here at home. I mean, obviously some of these rules are in place to make sure that atrocities don't happen, right? That
yeah.
there's certain, lanes to the road. The question is like,
But
how big
but
are
just
those
yeah,
lanes, right?
just imagine that we have the most like advanced technology with night vision goggles and our PEC-2s, which have infrared that nobody can see unless you have night vision goggles on, that we sneak around and we can do everything we need to do at nighttime and keep the enemy at bay. And then they're like, hey, guess what, you can't do that anymore. And then they just plant bombs everywhere at nighttime. I mean, that's what happened to us.
Yeah.
So I sound bitter. Like I don't want to be bitter, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's two things I live by. Number one, I can't change the past. So I don't dwell on it, right? I'm just reminisce 25 years, arms and legs. I've had 9 years that are incredible without, one bad day at work. And the next thing I tell people is I can't always control my situation, but I can always control my attitude. And my situation is no arms and legs, right? That's me. But hey, I drove out to my foundation today for lunch with the families out here. I got some photos I got to do and stuff like that. I got a chance to talk with you and got a new puppy yesterday. I mean, life goes on. Life goes on. So my attitude is going to be stellar because I can't change it.
How do you do, like, is that a practice, Travis? Like people pay a lot of money for like the self-help
Yeah.
books and I'm going to go and meditate in the mountains I mean, listen, and I've thought about doing it all, especially, my kids, Travis, like
Wonderful.
I have thought about
Wonderful.
escaping to, to do a meditation seminar, but Bible, I could do anything. Like people pay big money to find what you just found right now,
Yeah.
or just talked about, which is like, hey, like I'm going to be at peace with where I'm at and have a good time. Do you have to do you have to remind yourself of that? Like, how
Uh,
did you get to that place and then stay in that place?
I'm just so fortunate. A lot of my guys didn't make it back home that I knew, and they left behind their loved ones, and their loved ones sacrificed so much as well. I think, boy, I might have no arms and legs, but how fortunate and lucky am I to have the ability to still be here with my family? My wife and I, my son's birthday is today. Actually, he's 4 today.
Oh my
Yeah, so
gosh.
Dax turned 4 today, um, and I have the ability to still keep pushing forward in life. So why would I let this little setback, mess me up for the rest of my life? And I think once you almost die, in the way that I almost did, you just don't have. I guess I don't know. Little things bother me. I'm like, whatever. Like it is what it is. Let's just roll with it and keep going forward.
Well, if anything, what the last, even just the footage over the last several days, I think for many it's been so stunning because you can see the desperation people want for freedom, and like what are the actual stakes? And we just sort of aren't reminded. We're so busy sometimes debating each other, having the freedom of speech to actually have these conversations where we can get really mad at each other.
Yeah.
That we can easily sort of forget that not everywhere in the world lives like this, that you could have open debate and talk about our leaders however we want, whenever we want, for the most part. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Represent the Olympics and not even represent the flag. Yeah, it's really great. It's really great that
Well,
us
so
know.
it's interesting. Rachel has a great question. She said, how would you describe what this all means for our safety in the United States? Like, do you feel concerned about, we had the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up. Like, are you
Yeah.
concerned about our security here at home at all?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it because I feel like we're always protected and safe. And, we had that black eye that we got from 9/11 and we really prepared ourselves. But then I think, well, geez, with how easily we gave up Afghanistan right before 9/11, is there some lone wolves out there that have been here and that are just waiting for a day to do something? And I hope that our intel communities and, all of our protection agencies against that kind of stuff just, root out all evil. And I think they can and they will. And, I hope that it's going to be safe. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I always wish for the best.
Uh, Interesting. Another great question is just about perception,
Yeah.
about the perception of the country, about whether or not this has affected the perception from other people around the world, or is that perception something that has changed, you think, in the last several days?
Well, I watched the thing with Pete Hegseth today. I'm not sure if you like Pete or not, or you know who he is. I
For people
think,
who don't know, he served in the military. He works at Fox News now.
yeah, we kind of became friends with him a little bit. Whatever. Not like great friends, but what his perception was, he said, we were over there fighting every day as the U.S. and coalition forces were over there, but they were only allowed to do so much and not as much as we were allowed to do. So I think we were the ones kind of in charge of that war, and the way we pulled out, probably doesn't look good around the world. At the same time, it's something we had to do eventually, and everybody else must be already out of there, right? I don't see anything on if the Brits are still there or the French or.
Well, interesting. The Brits actually sent back some support troops like over the last couple of days, from what I can see from the pictures. And obviously, there's some European nations that are still represented there, and they're having trouble getting their people out too. So it's not just us that are trying to evacuate our diplomats, for example, or the people that helped us. I just think that
is that all on us? Do you think then? I'm not supposed
well,
to answer you. I'm sorry.
No, it's an interesting question. I think one of the big takeaways from watching the messaging, watching the press briefings, and it's really important just to listen to what people are saying, because they're going to tell you something. Even when they sound like they're not saying anything, they are telling you something. And what I would say is that it's very clear that we don't have a great handle on the numbers. We don't have a great handle. We're not speaking publicly about how many Americans are outside of Kabul, that we need to get back to Kabul to get out of the country. There's a lot of confusion and chaos. And clearly, even though the State Department and Department of Defense said that they planned for contingencies, they've also on the record admitted that they were really caught off guard by this. And I think those things together, I'm not pontificating. It's like we, as journalists, we're not getting exact numbers. We're not getting exactly how this is all going to happen. Like what are like these C-17s going to just load up with people? And like you saw that big image, I'm sure many people have just people stacked into C-17. I mean, Travis, you've traveled on some C-17s before, yeah?
Oh yeah.
So like, have you ever seen anything like that ever? Of people just like, it's like cattle, like in a C-17 like that. Have you ever seen that?
No, we normally had seats on the side, and then they had like middle row seats, and then people just lay on the ground, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're seeing is not normal. And I think that we need to underscore it, because I don't have a point of reference. I've never been on a C-17 before. So the other thing is that we do have equipment that we're trying to get out of the country. And that's like one of the questions was asked, like, well, what takes priority? Like, are the Americans? What about these special immigration visas? These people are going to potentially could be killed, so we're in America. How do you prioritize? I mean, these are things that obviously are happening at the highest level. You said something though, Travis, you said it didn't have to happen like this. Like what we have seen was terrible. Like while you're saying, hey, this was going to happen eventually. We saw the writing on the wall. I could have told you this several years ago when I was in Afghanistan, like what actually transpired over the last couple of days didn't have to happen this way. Like, why do you say that?
Well, I mean, I just feel like the fear of retaliation from maybe this administration compared to the previous administration wasn't there. And I think, the way that we were doing it with the previous administration was kind of slowly but surely, like quietly getting people out instead of making a big grand announcement and making it, it was just a debacle, like, hey guys, we got to get out now. Oh my gosh, Taliban are coming. And then I have heard through the grapevine that the Afghan National Army, the reason that they laid down a lot of their weapons and stuff and didn't fight back was not because they were scared or anything like that. They weren't getting paid for like the last 4 months. Have you heard anything about that?
No, but the president did mention that specific. It's interesting you say that, because I thought it was interesting that he said this. He said, we paid them. Like we paid them salaries, we gave them equipment, we gave them training. Like he was sort of listing. So that's interesting. I haven't heard that, but the president did say that yesterday. He did say something about payment.
Yeah,
so
I don't know. I don't know if there's ever a really good way to pull out of a country and be done with it. But at the same time, I don't think we should have gave back the air bases. I feel like those should have been like held by us for like a hardship duty like South Korea is. And that way we had at least some strategic air support and things in the region that made sense to keep, and we put trillions of dollars over there.
Yeah. Just going back to your time there, Travis, and life under the Taliban, because one of the big Associated Press wires today, so the wire copies coming out, the Associated Press, when they put out a story, it goes everywhere to every news network. And that's why you sort of see copying, right, of different reporting, because this is a big international wire service. So what they're saying is that the Taliban are talking about how they're going to be tolerant, how they want to include people in government. And I was just wondering, from your experience on the ground, like from the people that you were able to communicate with, or from what you've been able to see, when you hear a headline like that, where does your mind go?
They're just saying what they got to do, like what they want to say. I don't believe it. I haven't been there, I guess, in 9 years, so I don't know if they've changed. But they make the women cover their faces. They walk 30 feet behind the men wherever they go. The little kids, they don't respect the little girls at all. And I don't know if it's a softer, more tolerant Taliban than before, but I guess unfortunately it doesn't have to be America's problem right now anymore. Once we get all the people out, we're not. I guess we shouldn't maybe be world police all the time, but I don't believe it. Just like I don't believe that Al Qaeda is really not there. Like, oh no, they're not here.
Right.
How are they not?
Right. Right. As you say, it's not like they walk around in uniforms, right? Oh, there's the blue team, there's the red team, and we kind
Yeah.
of know. However, there's been conversation and I know you got to go soon, Travis. There's been conversation over the last, really dating back to when I started reporting on this, that we know exactly where the bad guys are. That when I say bad guys, like the worst, in Miran Shah and these tribal areas of Pakistan, and I'm sure a lot of Americans never even heard the word Miran Shah before. I didn't until I learned more about it. That we know exactly where the bad guys are, like exactly where they're pulled up, where they're organizing, where they're living. Did you hear about that, Travis?
Oh yeah.
That we know where they are, but why aren't we going to get them? If these are the bad guys, then why don't we go
Well,
after
now we
them?
know exactly where they're at because they're in the presidential palace. They're in the old bases that we have. I mean, they're all sitting just right there, hanging out right now in Afghanistan. What can we do? But also, I mean, if I've done my research correctly, which I'm definitely not a journalist and smart like you, but it feels a little bit like Vietnam when they were 7 miles outside of the capital of Cambodia, where all the Viet Cong were hanging out, and they got called down. Said, no, you guys can't go in there. We're all the bad guys. We're right there. So I know they're saying it's not like Saigon, and we do the comparisons and pictures and stuff, but it feels a little bit like Vietnam, where like we went over there, conflict, right? Never a war, fought, and then came back.
So let's go back to your personal story, because a lot of people, obviously, we've been through, we don't want to forget we're going through kind of a difficult time with the pandemic. You're a business owner too, right? So you've come back from this injury. You've obviously gone through a tough period just in general, in recovery, figuring out your next part of life. You've set up all these different businesses. You have a nonprofit, which I want to ask you about as well. But you've obviously navigated some really tough times, Travis. Like, do you think that is there like a point in the past, couple of years where you were like, man, this could go either direction. I'm not sure where it's going to go. That kind of period of like almost hopelessness. And like, how did you navigate past that period where there was a lot of unknown and uncertainty and things were scary?
You mean for like the COVID stuff for my businesses and
Well, I'm just
foundation,
saying
or
anything. I'm saying like all
oh
of us have been through really tough times, that we didn't expect. Like, I'm sure you
yeah,
didn't expect to lose 2 arms and 2 legs. Like, I didn't expect to live through a pandemic. Like these are some
yeah.
things that we're all kind of, and now didn't expect to see Afghanistan this way. There's a lot of things that are happening in the news that can make people feel pretty hopeless. And obviously, you've been able to push through some challenging times. So I'm curious, like, was there a moment ever, since your injury where you're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it through? And like, how did you get past that moment?
I mean, in the very beginning, I was obviously in a rough spot where I was like, man, this sucks. Why not just die? How's this gonna be better for my family and everything like that? Me being a burden. But then I, found out how I was able to do everything, and walk and drive and talk with you, of course. And then my foundation, I was worried like, yeah, we're gonna make it. We have a state. We have a $6 million building we're putting up. Breaking ground September 11th is like a function, a gala, and remembrance for the 9/11, but also 300 guests coming out here. More than welcome to come. Anybody wants to come out to a black tie event in Maine. We're having lobster, I believe. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't even need it. But then for my personal business, where the governor of Maine was like going to shut everybody down, I went on the news and I was like, look, I'm 33. I'm not going bankrupt. So you can come and shut me down physically. But besides that, we're going to just go with it, because at some point we got to stick our flag in the ground and say, wow, let's just get after it, because I'm done being afraid of anything, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So I just kind of live life with a smile and go about my day. And luckily, people they give me a free pass if I say something that they don't like because I got no arms and legs. Like, I get pulled over all the time, and I'm like, my foot got stuck, officer. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. And they're like, oh, it's okay, Travis. I got pulled over with my seatbelt off the other day, going 50 or 20 over, and the police officer walked to my truck, and I was like, hey, we're on a hill. This is dangerous for the construction workers over here, for you, for the cars coming over the hill. Follow me to my house. He came to my house, and I parked at the end of my driveway, and I was like, going over everything. My seatbelt was off. I mean, it was dangerous. I had to hurry up. I was supposed to have a phone call with History Channel, right? And I told him I got a phone call in 10 minutes with History Channel. So if I'm getting a ticket, like we got to go for it. Oh, my license was suspended too.
Oh,
Suspended. But all he did was like, oh, hey, I love all the stuff you're doing. I'm like, hey, man, thanks. He goes, I'm glad you didn't try to use who you are to get out of this. I'm like, no, if I deserve it, I'm going to take the ticket. And then he let me go. And then my phone went bing. And my History Channel thing got pushed to the next day. I was like, oh, hey, my meeting got pushed. Do you want to give me a ticket now? I got time. He said no. And I said, now watch how fast I go up my driveway. And he didn't like that, but he couldn't do it, and I hammered him.
Does this work with your wife too? Does it work with your wife? Does she give you as much as a pass?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She gives me a free pass to the couch, or my arms and legs taken away. Yeah. I don't got to ask. Just happens. Put me in the closet. I'm like, let me out of here.
All right. Fair point. Does anyone have any final questions for Travis? Travis, are we keeping you? What do you got to do today? You got to go to lunch? What's happening? It's like
we have, so as the Travis Mills Foundation, where we bring
yes,
out
tell us about that.
And service-connected injured veterans. I'm sitting here in the study. Barbara Bush donated this room because she was all about reading. That's right. Babs would call me up all the time. Me and Georgie and Babs would hang out. She's, whatever. We chilled. And we have 7 families in this week. I'm going to have lunch with them, say hi, and then I got a bunch of filming this afternoon. And then Dax wants cheeseburgers with mayonnaise for his birthday dinner. So very exciting.
That sounds amazing, by the way. So just tell us quickly, the foundation, just walk us through what it is, because people are going to be interested. They're going to visit travismills.org and all the stuff. So tell us.
Yeah, so the Travis Mills Foundation, we started it to bring combat and service-connected injured veterans up to Maine to show them how to do things adaptively with their families. I have a program director who is the one of the top physical therapists at Walter Reed. Yes, I stole her. I apologize to nobody because she's awesome and I wanted her on my team. And she runs it, and now we've grown to be one of the top 25 VSOs, veteran service organizations in the nation. We have our 8th week of family starting right now, and we also have a post-traumatic stress program. So if anybody that you know going through post-traumatic stress, we're part of the Warrior Path program out of Boulder Crest, and all you can do is go online, fill out the form, and you can come up to a free, it's a first week here intensive course, and then the rest is like 18 months follow-on of post-traumatic growth, and just excited to get back and do what I can. And besides for that, we have the kids come up and the people that are, we have a lot of success stories up here, and the ones that don't make it, we just throw them in the lake and move on. Go learn a new skill like kayaking. And I think you're going to be here for a dinner on Wednesday, I believe.
I didn't know if I was going to, I hope so.
If you're in town next Wednesday night, then we're having a dinner out here.
Okay, deal. I'm hoping that maybe we could do a Smarter News thing with you, and we could show everybody around because it's a former beauty executive manor that is now, what was it? It's the former, I want to say Estee Lauder. Is that right? That's not right.
Elizabeth Arden.
Thank you. Now that you know cosmetics better than I do, which is just one of your hidden talents, Elizabeth Arden Estate. So maybe we could walk them around and show them it's so beautiful. That would be fun. Yeah. So we should do that when we're there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll go on a golf cart ride too, and we'll rip around. We'll do some burnouts.
I've ridden with Travis, by the way. I know he's talking about getting pulled over. It's 100. What he's describing is 100% accurate. Yeah. He drives really fast. Okay?
No, I drive the speed limit that I make up because it's my America and I feel free. No,
okay.
Quit it. But okay, I appreciate the time.
Okay, final thing real quick before you go. This last question I always ask people, or guests, if you can give people just something smarter, Travis, when they see headlines developing about Afghanistan, what do you think is something like a perspective from a service member just to keep in mind as they're watching kind of the chaos that the news is reporting on a regular basis?
If I can reframe that, I would think from being a service member that can rise above all the negativity and understand I did something good. If you have somebody in your family that's a loved one that went overseas, maybe shoot them a text saying, hey, I'm not sure how you feel about what's going on in Afghanistan, but I am grateful for your service. I know you did a lot of good over there, and you and your buddies that went, really deserve a lot of praise. Maybe frame it that way, unless you don't want to. You don't have to. I'm not no one's boss, so do what you want. But I think that's what I would convey, because I know a lot of people are kind of wondering what was it all for. And they might not have the mindset that I have of hey, look, I had a great time, just one bad day at work, right? Uh-huh. Look at them. Oh, I dropped you. I'm trying to get my leg. Look at my leg. I'm married, ladies. I'm married. I'm just trying to show some leg.
Travis. My hand slipped.
per
This
usual. Oh!
These are the sort of parlor tricks that you get when you hang out with Travis Mills. And they never get old, Travis. They don't. They don't.
That's all I got
They're
left.
still
How
good.
could they? How could
They're
they? That's
still
all I
good.
got left. Anyway, I probably still
All
have
right,
too much for
Travis.
everybody.
I'll talk to you later. Okay, you can hang up on us, I think. Can you do
All right,
that?
there's an X. I got you to bring my nose in real close because how I use my
Okay.
phone because this hand doesn't work
Okay.
anymore. TravisMills.org for your Travis Mills needs. Thank you for your time, you wonderful young lady, you champion of the world. Tell the mister I said hello if you want. Okay.
Bye, Travis.
Thank you.
Bye, Travis. So you can see why I wanted you to talk to Travis. I think Travis offers us a very unique perspective. And if tone matters, then you got it from Travis. So just to review, one of the few surviving quadruple amputees in the nation, runs an amazing organization. If you want to learn more about Travis, a lot of you are asking, like, how can we help? How can we help? You know, the Travis Mills Foundation, travismills.org, is a place that you can go. And not every place is reliable when it comes to your funds. And when it comes to veteran services, they are. So check them out. If there's one thing to do this week that you're like, hey, how can I kind of become involved in this process? How can I learn a little bit more? TravisMills.org is the way to do it. So thank you to Travis for that. We'll return to some of the headlines. We'll get you guys. We want to make sure you have that foundation. But the voice of our veterans, you can hear, you know, is really, really valuable. And it's that eyewitness, that person that didn't just go for a day, that stayed. You know, Travis's deployments were for a year. So that's a lot of time, you know, especially a young man's life. He was 25 years old when he was injured. So that's important to rely. We have this wealth of knowledge in America. All these people that have deployed, and they all have a story, and they need to be included in the news coverage that we're having on a regular basis. And that way we can get the balanced perspective of our leaders, our policymakers, our diplomats, and our service members. They all matter. And so we're going to try to we'd like to say, pull on those threads, weave them together. And then what you're left with is something that can be helpful, especially when it comes to the news. So questions, comments, let me know. We'll have all of this interview posted on our website at smarternews.com, as well as on YouTube, so that you can share it. And hopefully you could, you know, if you'd like to watch it again, hear more of Travis's perspective. But back to the news, back to the headlines. And thank you so much for your support. Always more on smarternews.com. Have a great day, guys.